And welcome to this Building Trust in Trying Times webinar. I'm your host, Dale Dixon. And as we have with this webinar series from Better Business Bureau, we're working to make this as interactive as possible. As you listen to today's presenter, make sure and note any questions you have. We'll be answering those questions as we draw to a close for the webinar. Look at the bottom of your screen in that Zoom box. You should see a Q&A box. Go ahead and you can populate questions as we go through the presentation, then we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar. Better Business Bureau has a host of resources for you as a small business. This webinar is live for BBB accredited businesses and will be posted within probably an hour to 2 hours on our YouTube and Facebook pages, YouTube channel and Facebook pages. So you can watch for it there and share it with other business owners who will find this information so important and timely during these trying times. There's also a web page specifically for getting the latest information to you as far as building trust in trying times, and we'll make sure that's posted in the chat box of this webinar. Today's guest and presenter is Amina Moreau. Amina is the co-founder and Emmy Award-winning Still Motion and Sway storytelling companies that are committed to the meaningful impact of storytelling. She has been entrusted by some very notable circles over the years and loves empowering people with the strongest tools to get their word out more effectively. With an extensive background in the psychology of storytelling, 30 years of competitive tennis, yes, tennis, and a passion for contributing meaningful impact, Amina has found her calling. Amina thrives when working with people that embrace a strong why and provides most valuable in environments of leadership, creative strategy, and business growth. At the heart of it all, story. Amina, thank you so much for being with us today. And this is an important topic as you look at how businesses are working through this time and preparing to thrive afterwards. Being connected to that story is important. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you for today's presentation. Thank you so much for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And you're absolutely right. I think this is a critical time to be talking about storytelling and about building trust. And I thank you very much for having me. This has been a tremendously challenging time for such a varied number of reasons for everyone. And I know that for myself as a small business owner, I have had an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And I have had the privilege of speaking with friends, colleagues, fellow small businesses in my immediate community. And one thing that has been tremendously inspiring is seeing the community come together as we are today. And so what I would really love to do is to start off our time together by sharing with you a little bit of why I'm here in the first place and why we're talking about storytelling in particular. And frankly, I am here because several weeks ago, I felt completely helpless. And in some ways, I was doing much more okay than a lot of other people that are in my boat, an entrepreneur with a business, with people to support. But there were, in some ways, I was fortunate because I already worked from home a lot, and while work slowed tremendously, it didn't screech to a complete stop. But one of the biggest reasons that I felt kind of useless, really, is what it felt like, was that I was seeing all of this struggle, all of these challenges, people on the brink of going out of business, some of them going out of business, and I didn't have any semblance of how I could help. Sure, I could maybe make a small donation, or I could contribute some resources, but it wasn't big enough. And especially, this is happening not just here in my local community or even just in the United States, it's happening everywhere. And then somebody asked me about crowdfunding and what I thought about crowdfunding and things like gift cards, and whether there was a resource to help small businesses reach their audiences better, and whether there was a way for patrons to find businesses that were struggling and figure out how to contribute themselves better. And I thought, well, what a great way for me to maybe make a bigger impact by helping others make a bigger impact. And that's really what led to the creation of Float Small Business, which is really just a matchmaking site between struggling small businesses and patrons that might have the means to help. And that's how I got connected with the BBB, and how we started talking about storytelling as a way, as a means of survival, or at least a tool for it. But watching the community come together through this platform and then beyond, that took any feelings that I had I was discouraged. I didn't know how I could make that impact. And by creating this and really just thinking outside of myself, and then witnessing the generosity that I've seen from small business to small business, but then the whole community rallying, was huge. And that really what brings me and brings us here today, because without this, I wouldn't have even known about this webinar series of building trust in trying times. And it's so empowering to me to be a part of this conversation today, because frankly, all of this is keeping me afloat, because it's bringing me a sense of purpose in one of the most difficult times that I've ever faced. But really quickly, I want to touch on why we're talking about trust, why this is even a series that the BBB is doing, and why I feel it's important to be even talking about trust. Trust is critical for maintaining revenue streams, for negotiating with suppliers, for asking the community for donations if that's what you're doing, for rallying employees whether they are working right now or not. It's entrusting ourselves as business owners, and it's in the stories that we tell to ourselves about ourselves and what we are capable of that can sometimes make the biggest difference. And so I believe that storytelling, and I've believed this for a long time, that it is one of the most powerful tools for social change out there, bar none. And as an extension of that, because for social change you need trust, I think that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools for building and fostering trust and relationships with people. Because at the end of the day, it's those relationships with people that I think are going to get us out of this situation. And so moving forward in that line of thinking, let's not start with what is a story. Let's start with what isn't a story. Because right now, story and storytelling is a little bit of a buzzword. Everybody is a storyteller. Everybody that has an iPhone in their pocket, has a camera, has video, everybody is a storyteller. And if you're in the world of marketing, it's, you know, 1,000 times fold. But not everyone is a storyteller, and not everything is a story. A story is not just a list of facts. It's not a collection of bullet points. A story is not what your business does. It is not your key differentiators. All of those things may be components of a story, but just saying what you do is not a story. In this context that we're going to be talking about today, a story is a personal account of going from point A to point B. And to summarize it in a really cliche sort of way, it's a journey. But I think it's a cliche for a reason. We talk about journeys because they get you from point A to point B with some events along the way. And stories that take people on an emotional journey tend to build trust and to make people care, quite frankly, a lot more. And that's why character-driven stories are what we're going to be talking about today, because they tend to make people care more than if we're just talking about a thing or a place or a business or a concept. When we're talking about people, we can connect faster and connect more deeply with our audiences, and thereby building trust more efficiently. And so let's hop into the meat of it. There are 3 questions that you should be asking yourself as a small business owner. If you can answer these 3 questions, you are ready to tell a really great story that's going to be compelling for your audience. And those 3 questions, and that's all really we're going to be talking about, is these questions: how to ask them well and how to answer them well. 3 questions are: what do you want? Why do you want it? And what's standing in the way? Now, at the outset, it looks really simple. Let's dive into each one, why it's important, and why digging a little bit deeper and going beyond the surface is really going to pay off in the long run. So let's talk about this first one. What do you want? What we're getting at here is desire, but not just any level of desire, but relentless desire. It's not what do you want, it's what do you really, really, really want to accomplish, to overcome. Why are you in this? What do you want? Is it, in the context of COVID-19, is it to survive? Or is it more specific than that? Is it to serve others? Is it to do more of what you love? Is it to change your industry? The reason that it's great to get specific about what you want as a business, as a leader, is because everyone wants to survive. Everyone does. And on one hand, that makes your desire relatable because everybody wants it. Everyone can connect to that. But at the same time, if everybody wants it, it makes it a little bit less unique. So think about what it is specifically that you want as a business and as a human being, because again, we're telling a character-driven story here. And to just use the example of, I'm not a chef by any means, but let's take the example of a chef maybe that is a restaurant owner. And maybe that chef's desire is to get back into the kitchen with the whole team and create the most innovative menu that they've ever had. That's more specific than just surviving. It could be a piece of surviving. And maybe surviving this is a critical component of getting back into the kitchen to create that really innovative menu. But we've gone more specific than just surviving. So think about your business, think about what you do, and then go just a little bit deeper. What do you want out of all of this? Not only will that help you tell your story better externally when you're connecting with potential customers and the rest of your audience, hopefully it will also help clarify your own goals and what you are working toward yourself, within your team, within your family, and so forth. So that's question 1. Question 2 is related to what you want, and that is, why do you really, really want it? This is important because it gives your desire depth. It goes beyond the surface of just wanting it, because if you have a good reason for wanting it, people are going to care that you really want it that much more. I already stressed that really wanting it is important because you can't expect your audience to want something more than you do, right? If you think of your favorite Hollywood movie, the main character really, really wanted to either accomplish something or overcome it. If they just kind of cared, you probably shut the movie off. And that's the same thing with your own storytelling. But then taking that a step further and thinking about why you want it, and then not being afraid to communicate that deeper why is going to go a really long way. So think about what you want, but why? Because it means you'll be able to retire early? Well, most audiences would consider that to be a fairly shallow reason and probably won't connect as much with your desire if it's just to get rich quick and then go, live on some island somewhere. But maybe you want that thing because whatever you do on a daily basis in your work is extremely meditative. Maybe it's a creative outlet that brings you peace. Maybe in that chef's example, where you want to get back in with the team to innovate, maybe it's less about innovation and more because in that chef's past, he or she had a challenging time and a mentor showed them how teamwork can change everything. Maybe the why is something that really stemmed from something in your past, something maybe as far as your upbringing that made you the type of person to want the kinds of things that you want. And without getting too personal about it, at the beginning of our time together today, Dale introduced me as caring very much about using storytelling for meaningful change. That is my desire. That is what I want. I want to make a positive impact. And I want that more than anything. I don't want to just offer storytelling services to get rich people richer. I want to make some kind of positive impact throughout my life and throughout my career. Why? Well, that stems back to something that happened when I was 14. And without spending too much time in a sob story, I grew up in like the best possible childhood you could ever imagine, full of love, full of support, full of, shelter, parents that loved me. But what I didn't realize was I was sheltered from the real world. And one day in my teens, when I was 14, it all came screeching to a halt. And my world was turned completely upside down. And people that I trusted, I couldn't trust anymore. And peace became turmoil, and trust became fear, and life became death. And I had to grow up really quickly. And I went from feeling like the world was blissful to what? What is happening? And it was a very rude awakening into what this world can actually serve up. And that was a very big turning point for me, because I could have become really jaded and really bitter, or I could have used it as an opportunity to grow and maybe learn from it and try to fix things. and that is, that is what contributes to my work every single day. It's not just that I want to make a positive impact. Everybody wants to make a positive impact, but I became a human being because of this why, and now it's built into my DNA. I can't not do this. And let me be really honest about this. It's not easy to share this. I'm talking to a webcam with who knows how many people in the audience. I don't even know how many of you there are. But I'm entrusting you with something very personal. And I am, because I know that if somebody out there in the audience connects with my why, then we're going to be well suited to be friends, to collaborate, to find solutions together. And by sharing something that is not easy, and not every why has to be this very dramatic story, but by putting ourselves out there a little bit, we open up opportunities for other people to connect on a deeper level. And now another reason why sharing or even asking why is not easy, besides the vulnerability part of it, is that it's easier to answer the question what than it is why. You know, if somebody asks you what you do, you know, you've probably answered that thousands of times. Very infrequently do we go to a networking event and somebody asks you, nice to meet you. Why do you do what you do? You know, it's almost absurd. But I feel like if we start asking ourselves that question, it allows us to not only communicate that more deeply with our audiences and connect in stronger ways, but to also connect in stronger ways to what we do in ourselves. And a lot of businesses right now are pivoting out of necessity. And knowing why we're in what we're doing can help us decide, well, if we've got a fork in the road and we could take 3 different directions, which one really aligns with what we want, and maybe more importantly, why we want it. And then the third question to be asking is, what is standing in the way, right? So what do you want? Why do you want it? And why is it hard to achieve? What is standing in the way? And this could be something that is posed in present tense, what is standing in the way now. But it could also be a story that was in the past tense, an obstacle that stood in the way that maybe you're still overcoming. Maybe you overcame and you already have the answer. Maybe there will be an obstacle in the future. We can be thinking of it in multiple ways. In the example of the chef, COVID-19 is kind of an obvious obstacle, but again, maybe it's more specific. Will you have a team to come back to? Will we even have a restaurant? Maybe the obstacle is money or lack thereof. Maybe the obstacle is people's fear of gathering in groups down the line. Maybe the obstacle is a supply chain problem. It's up to you as the storyteller, because you might have multiple obstacles. It's up to you to decide which obstacle to communicate that really relates to what you want and your why the most, but also think about your audience and what your audience relates to. And if you can choose to focus on an obstacle that relates and kind of brings the community together, then we can rally together more as a community. And, you know, for me, my obstacle in my desire to make impact was my own self. That was my obstacle. I wanted to make an impact on the world, and I knew why, and I knew what the defining moment was, and I thought that my biggest obstacle was kind of the world being too big. And I thought it was kind of like a woman versus nature type of conflict, but it ended up being a woman versus self. And that was a really important realization for me, that my obstacle wasn't the world and it wasn't all of these external things. The obstacle that I was really struggling with was how I saw myself. Now, with these 3 questions, what do you do with them? How do you actually tell a story? Because I told you a story isn't just a list, right? You can't just say, this is my desire, this is my why, and this is my obstacle. That's not a story. This is a story. This is what a story arc looks like. This is what a typical Hollywood movie story arc looks like, where you have point A, and you're trying to get to point B on the other side. You have a starting point, and then you have a goal that you're trying to work towards. You have something that you're aspiring towards, and somewhere towards the beginning of the story, this is called character development, is when you express your why and your desire. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in any particular order, because you could establish some event or some philosophy that highlights your why and then leads to a desire, but it could go either way. But expressing both towards the beginning of a story is going to get people to care about you as a character. And once they care, that's when you introduce the obstacle. I want this, and I want it so badly, and I want it because of this and this and this, and it's so important. but I've got this standing in the way. And that leads to a journey to figure out how to overcome that obstacle. And that journey may have some bumps in the road, can have some successes, it can have some failures. But ultimately, you come to a resolution. And that resolution can be affirmative, it can be positive, it can be, I got it, I've solved it, we won. It doesn't necessarily have to be, though. It could be, we figured it out, now I need your help. It could also be, that didn't work, got to start over. This is the story arc of most successful stories out there. And, you know, in my particular story, the way that, you know, I would plot out my story, it would be, you know, that I have this desire to fix the world, that I had a rude awakening from this blissful ignorance into the world kind of sucking, and then realizing that I really want to change that. But the obstacle was, well, I'm just one person. How can one person fix something so big? And then my journey has been filmmaking. I'm a film director, and I get to tell some really great stories. I get to help marketing teams get better at telling their stories. I get to do some consulting, and but all of these things, they're just kind of a trickle. And so while they're moving in the right direction, they're moving some things forward, that obstacle is still there. And that really leads me to kind of the answer, the resolution, which is why I'm here today. Because if I do the math, there are only so many meaningful stories or films that I can make in my lifetime to try to inspire change. But, and that's frankly, that's not enough. But if I can empower you to tell your very meaningful story better, and then you go off and you empower someone else to tell their meaningful story better, then theoretically, our impact collectively can become exponential. And we all know what an exponential curve looks like these days. And that, to me, is the answer. By being here today, you are helping me. This is going to sound super dramatic, but you are helping me live out my life's purpose. And that's really why I'm here today. And that is my story. And that could be the chef's story, right? The chef could be, you know, wanting to innovate. The obstacle could be COVID. And the journey could be trying many different creative solutions, including rearranging seating for when the restaurant opens up, offering different varieties of takeout and ordering in, charging $80 per burger because you know that $70 of it is going to a good cause. Could be applying for loans, not getting those loans. A journey of ups and downs to the answer. And I don't know what the answer is. Largely, I think it's community coming together. But that chef will have a story. That coffee shop will have a story. That artist will have a story. Each and every one of you has a story to share. It's just a matter of asking the right questions. Now, once we get to point B in our story, we have the opportunity to have a call to action. And I'm not going to spoil my story by extending my call to action for this webinar yet, because we're not at the end. But for the chef, the call to action may be donate. We've got to GoFundMe, or buy a gift card, or order takeout, not takeout, curbside, or whatever. You know, it could be any kind of call to action that they feel their audience can contribute to, and that will be helpful. And by having told the story in a more emotionally connecting way, it increases the chances of people actually taking you up on that call to action. And this is all really rooted in this idea of decision making and how people make decisions. There's a lot of psychology behind it, and that is a big part of my background. That whether people are deciding whether to buy a gift card or to, order in for dinner, or whether they're adhering to social distancing measures to begin with. It's all about how people make decisions. And the research shows that people typically, and this is not new information, but people typically make decisions pretty emotionally, subconsciously. People make decisions from the gut and then rationalize those decisions after the fact. So they feel like they've made it in a calculated way, even though it was made in the gut and then rationalized afterwards. And that, combined with the fact that people connect with other people more strongly than with abstract concepts, that is why character-driven stories with a strong desire, with a strong why, will make people care more, will make people support more. So those 3 questions, if there's anything to take away from this, it's just this. What do you want? What do you want it? And what's standing in the way? If you'd like to see how I've taken my personal backstory and turned it into a website, visit aminamoreau.com, and you'll see that the front page, it's like a paragraph basically. It's this much, but it talks all about my desire and the obstacle standing in the way. If you connect with that as, a stranger coming upon this site for the first time, not knowing who Amina Moreau is, if you read that and you connect with it, you might want to learn a little bit more about the backstory. And the backstory link takes you to the why. And if you connect with that, then you can follow any call to action, which includes reading my articles or contacting me. But people who don't connect with this story, that's totally fine. It's a great filter for not collaborating. Because if you don't connect with it, you will never get in touch, and that's great. It's a great time saver for you and for me. But if you do connect with it, then we know that we have a great foundation for moving forward together. So my calls to action are this. If you feel like this is a workflow that could be helpful to you, but you still have questions beyond this webinar, and we are going to get to a Q&A in about a minute, visit this link to schedule a half-an-hour session with me for free. And I will be happy to talk about what your challenges are and help you answer these questions for yourself so that you can get your story out there a little bit more effectively. So that's call to action number 1. Number 2 is to join the Facebook group that we have started through Float Small Business. There are a lot of businesses sharing some really creative, really innovative ideas on how to survive COVID-19. And then feel free to connect at any point through social media. This is our handle on pretty much everything. And so with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that have already come through the chat. That I haven't seen yet, but I'm sure Dale has an agenda for us. So thank you so much.
Amina, thank you for your time. So I had a bit of an epiphany, and I'll lay the context for business planning to open back up, especially those non-essential businesses right now. And as I was out this past weekend, I had to make a quick trip to Costco and a quick trip to Lowe's. And both those businesses were trying to redirect customer behavior. And Costco specifically, it was their refrigerator section, and they had arrows on the floor marking where people could walk in and where people could walk out. Lowe's, they had big signs on the doors. This is the exit. This is, and specific things that they were asking customers to do. Both cases, people were not paying attention. So that's the context for this question. As I think about the number of small businesses, the BBB accredited businesses that are sitting there writing out plans and trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like when I have to open the doors to my business as soon as we get the go ahead? Story can be a powerful tool to start to change customer behavior, because we're going back And it's not going to be business as usual. We're going to have to maintain social distancing for months to come. There are going to be new requirements for the protective equipment that's going to be required that businesses provide their customers, provide their employees, provide their vendors. There's a whole new way that we're going to have to operate as businesses. And your opinion, but I'm assuming that storytelling would be an important way to drive customer behavior as a critical piece of the plan as businesses get ready to open.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important elements of storytelling is understanding your audience and what they want. And so there's 3 questions that I just challenged everybody to think about themselves. It's just as important to be asking that about our audiences. What do our audiences want? Why do they want them? And what is standing in the way? And how can we as small businesses address those needs and those motivations? And so what I bet Costco and the like are not doing, which is leading to unwanted behaviors, is really thinking about what do those customers want. And chances are that if there are certain arrows and certain paths that you need to take, people are probably not following them because it's harder to. And so what Costco would be wise to think about is, how can we make it easier for people to follow our instructions than to break them? And so that would be the first question that I would be asking. But that requires telling a story inside of our minds of how a customer might be thinking. And I saw some really innovative conversations happening on LinkedIn in the restaurant industry yesterday about restaurants brainstorming how they can even reduce. They're asking questions like, can we reduce the amount of space between customers by creating distancing measures in other ways, like using plexiglass or things like that, using barriers? And so, if we can't ask our customers, or we can ask them, but they just won't do it, to do certain things, can we facilitate the behaviors by making it almost impossible or making it a no-brainer to do, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally? And that's what I think great storytelling does. Storytelling isn't just what we say. Storytelling is what we do, and actions speak a lot louder than words.
Fantastic. Amina Moreau, thank you so much for this time. We're about 7 minutes past for this 30-minute webinar. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise. Thank you so much for our attendees joining this. If you're watching a recorded version, we have many of these webinars that are up. You can subscribe on the YouTube channel. The link is posted in the chat box for this webinar. So with that, we're going to bring this webinar to a close. Amina, thank you again so much. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you everyone for joining, and good luck to everyone.